Hello, welcome to Live from the Abyss with Daath Nihilus. I have a special guest today. Her name is M.Kyndyll Lackey, and we're going to be talking about Babalon, sexual liberation, and sex magic. So, I'm trying to see how I can get Kyndyll on here. Are you able to get on, Kyndyll? Yep. Kyndyll, are you able to get on? Go ahead and add yourself to the live. I believe there's an option. There we go. I sent you an invite. Okay. She's Hey Heb, Kyndyll is just looking for the invite to join the live. Oh, what? She is unable to join. Sending you the invite again. Okay. We're having a little bit of technical issues here. So just bear with us, everybody, while we get situated. I sent you another invite, Kyndyll. It says you're unable to join. I sent you an invite. I'll send it to you again. All right. Sent you another invite. I believe you could. There should be. Oh, there we go.
Hi.
Technical issues resolved. Hi.
Hi there. I was trying to join on my computer, but apparently it's not going to let me. So here I am on my phone.
Yeah, I'm on my phone too. My computer doesn't really work out too well in this regard. Hello, everybody who's joining us. Oh, there we go.
Hi.
Technical issues resolved. Hi.
Sorry. It was still up on my computer. But no, sorry. Killing it as soon as I possibly could. So thank you for bearing with me, and apologies for the
Oh,
delay.
no problem. I've been in the same boat. My first live with Mavis Lynn was pretty much like that. We had set up to do a Twitch stream, and I couldn't figure out how to do Twitch, so we ended up doing Instagram Live, and this is why I've settled kind of with Instagram Live, because it just seems like a fairly easy format. So
Absolutely. Then once I figured out I needed to use my phone, then it was pretty.
I thought it would work on your computer as well, but apparently I was wrong.
No
So,
worries. We're here now.
right? Well, welcome to the Abyss. Number one, I have a series of questions. My first one is, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is M.Kyndyll Lackey, and I am a native Nashvilleian and a practicing neo-pagan of 24 years. And I've also been reading tarot professionally for the past 20 years, specializing in the Crowley-Harris Thoth deck. Before I became a full-time occultist, I spent 12 years working as a social worker and in nonprofit administration, and I was working predominantly with survivors of child abuse, sexual assault, domestic violence, and all of that practice deeply informs my tarot and consulting today.
Okay. And what kind of consultations do you do?
It's mostly tarot related.
Okay.
Use tarot as an archetypal tool to help people to examine their patterns and behaviors from an archetypal perspective, to help them to be able to get a bird's eye view of their situation and perhaps ways they may be thwarting their own growth or their own progress on important things, help them to make decisions that are in their best interest.
Nice, nice. And what kind of what drew you to tarot specifically?
Honestly, it was Lady Frida Harris's artwork that really captivated me. But before that, before I ever saw a Thoth deck, I had a friend from high school who had gotten a tarot deck, and we spent the entire summer after our senior year in high school playing with it. And then when I went away to college, someone had a Thoth deck, but no box, and they just playing with this tarot deck. And I remember looking at it and just absolutely loving the artwork, but they didn't know what it was called. So then I had to spend a few years trying to find it. And when I finally, found the Thoth deck and recognized it for the one I'd seen, there was no turning back, and I've been using it now for over 2 decades.
Nice, nice. Okay, my next question. I know I had two extra questions, but I wanted to kind of, expand on my first one there a little bit. My next question for you is, how do you incorporate Babalon into your practice?
Well, you could say that my practice is more incorporated into Babalon instead of the other way around. I'm a member and a priestess of Ecclesia Babalon, and Mistress Babalon owns half of my devotional heart, and the other half belongs to my Master Thoth. And I work with Babalon daily through a practice that we in the Ecclesia know as the Call to Babalon. And she's the guiding force for the Scarlet Temple, which is a private community that I founded.
Nice, nice. How did you come come to come to Babalon specifically as a deity of worship?
Honestly, the tarot has been my gateway drug. It has been the gateway to pretty much everything else in my spiritual life. I really do tend to view the world in terms of tarot archetypes. So, you know, though I first fell in love with the tarot deck for its art, over time I began doing more research into the more symbolic meanings and the philosophy that Crowley was contributing to the deck, and that introduced me to the Ionic Pantheon and to Thelema in general. And when I began getting comfortable with Thelema, I really experienced profound connection when I worked with Babalon, more so than any of the other deities. Um, she spoke to pieces of me that I felt like were not largely acknowledged or celebrated. That pieces of me that I often felt like I had to hide or subvert. And she helped to kind of get me past those things and to be able to embrace myself as a whole person and not bifurcate myself into acceptable and unacceptable pieces.
I can totally relate to that. I personally believe that there's a little piece of Babylon in all of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
With my next question, I wanted to we kind of touched on who exactly is Babylon, and how do we already know how it relates to you, but can you explain who Babylon is to people?
Sure, sure. So Babylon is a modern expression of a really ancient archetype called the sacred whore. She's a goddess of sex and war, and we can trace her lineage back to Mesopotamian goddesses Inanna and Ishtar. And to me, Babylon really represents that active feminine principle of the divine. She is the initiatrix, she's the creatrix, she's synonymous with the Holy Grail and Binah in the Tree of Life. She's the dark mother that gives birth to all of us and then also receives us after we die. So she collects us all and returns us to the all, the source, Godhead, however you choose to conceive it. And we connect with her anytime that we're vulnerably and truly connecting with other people, because her ultimate teaching is that we're all one.
Yeah, Babylon has a very interesting history for sure. I'm just starting to learn about some of the interesting connections. Like for example, Binah, on the Tree of Life. You know, that's the sphere of the Sephira that she's uh, known to be a part of, and it's also the Sephira that Saturn is also connected to. And so, in a sense, the divine feminine in that respect is kind of androgyne, where she takes on both feminine and masculine aspects. So she's not just a mother, she's a warrior, she's a queen, she's any role that modern women can take on, and it's not limited to just very our Puritan American, like, very rigid concepts of gender. So I really find that very liberating.
Absolutely. I think it's important that we recognize that Babylon represents that active feminine principle as opposed to a passive one. And we
Right.
see of a passive feminine when we look at, for instance, the triple goddess, or the Empress and the Tarot, which is really more of a nurturing, mothering, receptive kind of quality. And Babylon's quality is a lot more in control and powerful and acting on instead of being acted on. And it also helps us to kind of expand our understanding of the ways that the masculine and feminine can manifest, because if if the feminine can be not only passive but active, then also the masculine can be not only active but also passive. And by working with Babylon, we learn to really expand our understanding of the human capacity. in any given situation or any given manifestation.
That's awesome. And also, there's a really interesting connection between Babalon and the Gnostic divine feminine Barbello. As Barbello is sometimes referred to in Gnostic scripture as the harlot, which, like you said before, there Babalon has a long history archetype with being the holy whore, but not necessarily in the negative context that we might treat that word, but more of the positive context. The one who freely gives their love in a positive way, as versus the more negative, misogynist, patriarchal abuse of that word.
Absolutely.
And with that, I wanted to get into your organization, Scarlet Temple, because we were talking about masculine and feminine, active and passive, and I wanted to understand how those aspects are incorporated into your organization.
Sure, absolutely. So, kind of a little bit about the Scarlet Temple. The Scarlet Temple is a private, online, adult-only, members-only organization. It's a community.
Forgive the noise, by the way. That's just the furnace. I call it thelemic hell. That's where all the Black Brothers go. Just don't pay any attention to that.
Well, I've got a crying cat in the background too, so I think we're even.
All right, but sorry, continue.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the Scarlet Temple is a private online community. It's members only. It's adults only, and it's at the nexus of sex and magic. So it's a place where people who are both sex positive and occult positive can meet other people like them, hone their own occult knowledge and practice, and partake in some of my more risque content that would ordinarily get me banned on most platforms. So the purpose of ST is kind of to offer members a home online, a place where they can go to be their whole selves without reservation, safely, and where they can explore sex and from the occult perspective, not just from our typical mundane perspective, and then forge relationships with Holy Mother Babalon, with other members who become friends and lovers and spiritual siblings, and in some cases mentors. So, and the reason that all this kind of got started was my husband and I opened our marriage and entered ethical non-monogamy, and we found lots of places that we could explore non-traditional sex, but they weren't occult friendly. And then I quickly found out that there's plenty of places that you can explore occult spaces and occult ideology out there, but being occult friendly, number of people like us, occultists who view and revere sex as a sacrament, who are out there trying to piece together a community from disparate sources. And we realized that, it's just incredibly frustrating to try to put together your tribe or your family of choice or your pack in this way. And because of that, Scarlet Temple became a natural solution to give people like me and my husband a safe and fun atmosphere to get that need met.
Okay. Now, I wanted to go over real quick. So you kind of answered question 8 about how Scarlet Temple helps people reclaim their sexual power and expression. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah. So, well, there's some things that I wanted to kind of talk about here that Okay. So
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna back up just a hair.
Okay.
Because part of we're talking about when we're working with Babalon is Babalon and sex magic is a common like intersection in between
Right.
all this stuff. It's a really titillating topic. It's one that seems to be shrouded in a lot of confusion and mysticism, probably to some extent on purpose. But sex magic is a really important modality in working with Babalon. It taps into our innate ability as a natural creator and harnesses our uniquely human ability and capacity to consciously create and channel that literal lust for life into intentional results. So when we're practicing sex magic, we're essentially emulating Babalon as a sacred creatrix. We're using the sacred gift of our life force energy as a magical tool to complete an alchemical process that yields something entirely new that's never existed before, and that makes it extremely powerful. And so when we're talking about what Scarlet Temple does in helping people to reclaim their power and their expression is we're first of all, we're talking about sex unabashedly and with joy. And we post pictures of ourselves in our sexual power and in our true expression, and we share fantasies that cheer each other on, and we learn from each other in both like academic kinds of settings and ways, and also more emotional ways, and ways that we challenge ourselves to grow in the way that we view the world around us. And because we vet each and every member, we all feel safe to be ourselves. We have members of all genders and all sexualities and ethnicities and from all around the world. And by being in community with people who are different than us, different than ourselves, we get a really special opportunity to broaden our sexual horizons in a way that's non-threatening and without pressure. And so for some of us, that means that we're sharing a new picture for the first time ever. Sometimes it's reading about somebody else's positive experience of something that scares us, or finding other people who are into the same fetishes that we're into, and we've never met anybody else who's into what we were into. And this is a community that revolves around the celebration of each individual, loving ourselves as we are, learning how to stand in our sexual power and find the freedom to express it, so that we can then take that vital life force energy that's unencumbered by shame and direct it toward actually improving our lives, getting much more than just sexual gratification or emotional gratification, but actually being able to channel it as a magical tool, as a magical current into magical workings.
Now, when it comes to sex magic, well, I know this is a Scarlet Temple is a group. It's a group setting with regards to that. Is solitary, sex magic possible?
Absolutely. Sex magic can be carried out in any number and any combination of consenting adults, from 1 to infinite, and and people of any gender and any combination of genders, any of that. Because the point is that the way that sex magic works, so put simply, sex magic is the practice of consciously and sacramentally devoting our sexual and orgasmic energy toward a very particular outcome. It's similar to any other kind of magical working in that you are deliberately raising your energy. Most of the time that's accomplished via ecstatic dance or drumming or chanting. But you're raising that energy, and when it reaches its peak, you release it and direct it at the goal that you have set for the magical working. It's the same thing. In the case of sex magic, the peak occurs, obviously, at orgasm. And the form of sex magic that we're most familiar with in general, whether you're a magically inclined person or not, would be sexual congress that results in a pregnancy. But that's far from the only manifestation. In fact, it can be used for pretty much anything that you would use magic for. And it can be practiced, like I said, by any number of consenting adults.
Okay. I'm just starting to discover what sex magic is, and how to practice it, how to implement it, and how you can actually see the the benefits of it, you know. So I'm just starting out. So your discussion on it here is it's saving me a lot of money in books. Let's put it that way.
Because I spent a whole lot of money in books.
Well, I appreciate your wisdom on this subject, for sure. I think you killed like 2 questions here, about how sex magic helps reclaiming one's sexuality. Um, did you discuss the connection between Babalon and sex magic?
Yeah, it's a modality. It's part of working with her. It's an important part, but not the only way that we can, because essentially we're emulating her when we practice sex magic. But and instead of viewing sex magic as a way to reclaim your sexuality, you could actually look at it vice versa. That reclaiming your sexuality actually makes sex magic possible. That in order to practice sex magic, we have to first reclaim the right to be sexual. And before you can reclaim the right to be a sexual being, you have to be rid of sexual shame. So shame is the magic killer, the sex drive killer, the confidence killer, the connection killer, the safety killer. And in order to reclaim sexuality for our own, that is to take back our sexuality from the external authorities who insist on a narrative that sex is dirty and shameful and sinful, we have to first slay the shame that keeps us hiding our sexual desires and wants away. And that prevents us from being able to have open conversations and openly enjoy sex. We got to kill that shame. You can't practice a sacrament that you're ashamed of. And working with Babalon is a way to re-examine the puritanical notions of sexuality that all of us grew up with. And that leads to reclaiming your sexuality and then being able to consciously use it as a tool to improve your life.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think you pretty much answered all the questions that I had. Oh, not to get too far off topic. How did you discover Ecclesia Babalon by chance?
Ooh, I started following Pineapple Abbey Official. Is where I connected in with Ecclesia Babalon, and I loved Ecclesia Babalon right away because it was made clear that the whole point in being a part of the Ecclesia is to do your will, to continue on with your own occult studies and contribute to the Babalon egregore, to the 156 current. So it was an invitation to continue what I was already doing, but to do it in the company of other people who were also doing it without some sort of prescriptive, this is the way you must go about it, this is the conclusion you must reach, and anything like that. I was really, really interested in being able to connect with Babalon on my own, to be received into her as she appeared to me, and to be able to do that in a way that still gave me community was really, really important. And the call to Babalon happened at our usual appointed time, and it was one of those. This is a rite that I can do immediately, that I have the supplies for, that wasn't going to ask me to join something first or buy something first or enroll or register or any of that stuff. It was just open and available technology that was made available to any and everyone who wanted to participate. And that's what got me. And then I got in and started getting to know everybody. I started getting to know you and Bob and Heb and all the other members, and fell in love. I fell in love with this group of people. And once you've done that, you are already working in the Babalon current, because you are connecting honestly, faithfully, and vulnerably with other people.
100%. I totally agree with that. And I mean, I've shared this sentiment with Bob, that I absolutely, when I was doing the call and, you were doing the call at the same time, um, I would do my posts, of a picture of Babylon and stuff, kind of show people, hey, I'm doing this, and then I'd see your posts, and I'm just like, oh my God, I just feel so left behind because the breakdown of the call and the just the words and stuff in your posts were just it was uh just so beautiful and so like spot on. I was like, wow, like how can I like how can I compete with this, but it's not really it wasn't really a competition, per se, but it was more like I was like, wow, how can I wish I had those kind of words, I'm not a,
Well,
I I barely survived English class, so,
I thank you. I appreciate it. Uh, I was doing the same thing to everybody else's posts. Ah, why did not
yeah,
work? But
me
at the
me
same,
and me and Bob both have had like just like a great like moment where we were talking about reading your posts and learning so much about Babylon and how she connected to everything, and it was just so awesome to read all that, and I'm just thinking to myself that I came into this not knowing anything, you know and so seeing your post really kind of brought everything, you know the fruitfulness of the message and the beauty of it. So thank you for all those lovely posts of yours, I have to say.
thank you. I'm pleased to be a channel. I'm pleased to just carry the words. They're not mine.
Yeah, Bob still talks about the sixth gate post as being the catalyst post for him.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. There was one other thing I wanted to kind of get a chance to touch on a little bit that we had
Yeah, of course.
covering tonight was the idea of overcoming ingrained taboos and
Mm,
with that we hold with regard to sex and sexual expression. I think there are a few ideological shifts that have to happen before we can really free ourselves from sexual shame and repression. So, first, I think we have to acknowledge that the way we were taught is not the only way to approach life. That there's an infinite variety of human thought and human systems and ways of looking at the world and also connecting with the divine. Secondly, we have to be willing to re-examine our ideas about sex and sexual expression and be willing to question them. You have to be willing to ask why a whole lot. And sometimes your why will be met with really good sound reasoning and you go, yep, I still believe that. I still agree with that. And you put that belief back on the shelf and you carry on. But sometimes you'll run into a why that says, well, that's just the way I was taught. And you gotta go underneath that and get to the underlying belief or value or conclusion that's supporting that idea. And then question that and
right.
say, is it true? And what's the impact of my believing this on myself and on my partners? And are there other ways I could look at this? And maybe even considering why do I think this is wrong or this is right or this is the way? And then thirdly, and this is probably the hardest part of the whole thing, we have to be willing to admit that we contain all polarities within us. We
Right.
all
Masculine and feminine. Yeah.
good and bad, masculine and feminine, light and dark, victim and tyrant, powerful and powerless. We've got it all. It's important that we recognize this because most of us interact with the world by dividing it into acceptable and unacceptable camps and then heavily identifying with the acceptable part only. And the problem is that's a shortcut. That's a shortcut that we use every day for just basic functioning and basic decision making, but it leaves you no room for grace or nuance or growth. And in order to be mentally strong enough to be able to reject taboos, we have to have developed strong enough critical thinking skills to change our mind. And integrating polarity into a unified whole is the way that we develop those muscles to be able to do that questioning.
Now, how do you, like, my personal belief is, when it comes to taboos and stuff like that, I think one of the biggest things that when it comes to sexual expression and empowerment, it begins and ends with consent. And I think that's one lesson that is not very touched on. And I was wondering if you could kind of touch on that a little bit, with regards to sexual empowerment and expression.
Absolutely. Consent is key. I mean, it's consent is what allows us to be able to practice self-empowerment and self-authority, and to stand in our own authority as stars in the company of stars. So when we talk about it from a thelemic perspective, when we look at, say, Liber Oz, which really outlines what our rights are as stars, we understand that our will and our right to do our will ends at the doorstep of the next person's right to do their will. So consent is one of those beliefs that I hope that people will take down off the shelf and look at it and go, why do I think this way? Yep, I still think this way, and put it back up on the shelf where it belongs. This is not an invitation to abandon all of our ethics by any stretch of the imagination. It's an invitation to examine our ethics and determine which ones are worth keeping and are of sound reasoning and contribute to the good of the self and others, and which ones are actually impediments and are doing more to limit ourselves than to free ourselves.
Right, and limiting yourself through those impediments is what in the Book of the Law is referred to as the only word that sin is restriction. And that's, when you're restricting yourself through those taboos and those preconceived notions that we have as a society, that's really what Crowley's talking about. He's not talking about, it's just like with, do what thou will does not do what you want.
Right.
So.
Exactly. It's an exercise in recognizing not wants, but purpose and drive. And there's a big difference between those two things, and you'll know it by how often one changes and the other doesn't. The long-term, forward-reaching, forward-looking, visionary kinds of things that we're driven toward, those are synonymous with will, capital W will, as opposed to wants, which are going to change over time, and what you want for lunch one day is not what you want the next day. That's a totally different, whimsical kind of concept that is wholly unrelated to will.
Yeah, 100%. Is there anything else that you would like to add, or would you like to take this time to maybe questions and answers, ask me a question, whatever you feel comfortable doing?
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to answer questions. I'm happy to talk a little bit more about Scarlet Temple or any of those things. I'm pretty open. Is there anybody who has been I haven't been watching the comments because of talking, so
right.
I didn't get a chance to see if anyone had questions or anything like that, but happy to answer questions about Babalon, about Babylonic practice, um, about the witchcraft, those kinds of things.
Speaking of which, the witchcraft. Would you like to elaborate that and Jack also on Jack Parsons as well?
Yeah. Jack Parsons was a really influential Thelemite who unfortunately died fairly young. He died, I think he was 38 when he passed. But before that untimely demise, he put forth an incredible body of work about Babalon and the Babalon current, and he was instrumental in carrying out what we know today as the Babalon working, which was an effort to help Babalon to become incarnate in a living human person, and a woman was his vision. And he also created, as an outgrowth of his experience in the working, he created something he called the witchcraft, which he saw was kind of the next step in Babalon's evolution to becoming, rather than being a secondary deity, as she is in Thelema, to becoming a primary deity, and to actually building a practice around her that was something of a cross between ceremonial magic and root working, what we commonly think of as witchcraft today. And he called it the witchcraft. And his vision for it was that that the primary deity would be Babalon, and her consort is Lucifer. I bemoan that he died so young because he didn't get the opportunity to really flesh that out. But I feel like that we are having something of a renaissance, a true acknowledgement of the new aeon that's beginning, and we've had some explosions in fabulous work by writers like Peter Gray and Menachem Berg-White, and Alkistis Demek, all of these people who are actively working with Babalon, writing about her in an academic sense, and really reawakening the world at large with regard to Babalon's current and her archetype and how that actually operates in today's world. Parsons was actually really, really progressive for his time. He was very much invested in egalitarianism and equality. He was pro labor and pro worker. He was pro freedom. So he kind of was what we would think of today as a libertarian, but with a very progressive social outlook. And he believed very strongly in feminism and in the rise of the feminine to be equal to the masculine. And in a lot of ways, his view of the world became what we typically think of as modern witchcraft and modern paganism. He also further created he invented the rocket fuel that made it possible for us to use space and land on the moon, and space exploration and what we know it today is right. Because of him.
Right. And what I find funny is that, or I should say also, is that he's not mentioned at all in any of NASA's history. They've completely erased him from the history of our space program, which is
crater on the moon they named after him.
Oh yeah, on the dark side of the moon, yes. Yeah, he's definitely there. But I just feel like, people are just starting to rediscover Jack Parsons after, kind of in the similar vein, Austin Osman Spare is kind of being rediscovered again by people. And, I'm starting to see also a little bit, it's probably more prevalent than I'm aware of, but I'm starting to see Babalon being more prevalent in music and pop culture, in the zeitgeist, now more so than ever, really. I mean, the only, in the 1960s and 70s, you might might hear us, there's a song from the 60s called Love is the Law, Love Under Will, And then in the 1970s, of course, you have Ronnie James Dio and Rainbow did the song "Gates of Babylon," and even though it was spelled like the Empire, you kind of got a real goddess vibe, very esoteric vibe from the lyrics of that song. But now you're starting to see Babylon being, I mean, like there's a song about Babylon in Lady Gaga's new album, which I found really surprising that I would, see that. And it felt the same way. There was some underlying esoteric vibes there,
Oh, totally. And if you look at Babylon purely from an archetypal perspective, and you look at the sacred horror aspect and the celebration of and the acceptance of and the joy of sex, we can actually trace that back even further. I mean, if you want to get really crazy on it, we can go back to the 20s and 30s when we had the so-called dirty blues movement, and you had artists like Lucille Bogan who were writing songs that were just unabashedly very explicit.
Right, like
modern day standards.
Like people talking about, oh my God, WAP, Cardi B's so evocative. I'm like, excuse me, there's this lady over here, right?
Absolutely.
And, it's just like there's no such thing. There's the trendsetter. Cardi B and Nicki Minaj and all. They're just copying what came before.
They're not copying. They are participating in the same current, in the same. Okay. We are, and what I love about an archetype is it doesn't matter what you call it. It's producing the same impact and the same effect. And that's what makes it an archetype. So one person may say mother, another person says mama, somebody else says mama, but the impact is the same. All of us on a cellular level know what the mother is, right? All of us on a cellular level understand what the warrior is, and the father, and death, and birth, all of these things. It doesn't matter what you call it. And it doesn't matter who did it first, because it's existed as long as we have. As long as there's been a human brain to think human thoughts, these archetypes have been with us. And the beautiful thing is we're actually getting to a point where instead of that archetype being something to be afraid of or locked away, it's actually being brought to light and talk about it like you and I are doing right now.
Yeah,
and that
for sure.
Absolutely.
We have a question. Can you participate in the call to Babylon without being a Thelemite? 100%.
Absolutely. And you can participate in the call to Babylon without being a member of Ecclesia Babylon. You can participate in the call without any kind of barrier. It's a communing. It is a coming together and an observance of a spirit, a vibe, a current, and you don't need permission for that. That is totally open. And I'm fairly certain Pineapple Abbey Official has probably shared the right before. And if not, it's definitely posted on the Ecclesia Babylon website, which is ecclesiababylon.com. And there are instructions. And there is no starting date. You can start it today. You can start it any day of the year. It does not matter. And then after you're done with that, the observance, the 77-day observance, then if you feel called to, you're certainly welcome to join the Ecclesia.
Yeah, and there's people who are members of the Ecclesia that aren't necessarily Thelemites either. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not technically a Thelemite in the sense of belonging to any kind of Thelemic organization. I describe myself as being Thelemic in my philosophy and in my view of the world. But you don't have to be a member of any particular organization.
I also feel like feminine people stepping into their dark divinity is Babalon making her presence known in us. I really feel like this idea of a villain era is our mother calling us home. I really love that sentiment, the wholehearted, brash, hungry acceptance of the dark.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, I lost you there for a sec. There we go. Audio's back.
Yeah, I love that because again, that returns us back to that discussion of opposites and how we all encompass all polarities, and we've gone through a really long period of flatly rejecting what we perceive of as dark or unknown, as being something that is wrong or scary or bad, and honestly, the dark is just the subconscious. It's just another layer of us. It's just another part of us. And there is no part of us that's inherently evil. So learning how to commune with the dark is learning how to commune with our own subconscious, learning how to be able to get in touch with all the pieces and parts of ourselves so that we can reclaim them and integrate them into a whole. So the Babalon, the Dark Mother is calling us home because our destiny is to learn how to be both, to be able to hold paradox within us comfortably, and to not be afraid of one or the other, but to be integrated whole people.
Right, and it's like what Crowley talks about uniting everything with its opposite. You know, uniting light with dark, left with right. You know, it's about Thelema is really about balance, and in that same respect, and also it also reminds me of the ending phrase of the love is the law, love under will. The nature of love in Thelema is about union, about uniting those opposite aspects of ourselves, and that also includes our sexuality as well.
Absolutely.
You know, we have several minutes left. I was wondering if you had any final thoughts you wanted to give, and also tell people where they can find you at. And of course, I will link all that information down below.
Absolutely. Well, I guess I wanted to throw out one more little tidbit about the Scarlet Temple because it directly responds to what you just said, and that is our vision of Scarlet Temple is that members will be able to create to greet the new aeon from a place of gnosis, personal empowerment, self-acceptance, and interpersonal connection, prepared to do their will and to support other people in doing the same. And in that way, I see ST as being part of the 156 current, as a contribution to Babylon's egregore, and as a tribute to her glory. So I am very interested in connecting with anyone and everyone who is both sex positive and occult positive. Those are the two things that are necessary in order to join the Scarlet Temple. And folks can take comfort in the fact that we do vet every single member. So we make sure that people who are applying to join our community are both of those things, and they are over the age of 18 or over the age of majority, wherever it is that they live, and that that everyone is who they say they are. So people can rest comfortably and can connect openly and vulnerably with one another, because we can have faith that we are talking to who we think we're talking to. And as far as following me or finding me or reaching out about the Scarlet Temple is currently in its beta phase. We're growing and developing as we speak. So we are working on the website. That should be available, I think, next week, early next week. There should be a website that I can direct folks to. But in the meantime, if you want to learn more about the Scarlet Temple, you can do so on following me on Instagram. And my Instagram profile is M as in Magdalene, Kyndyll, Kyndyll, Lackey, Lackey. So there's 3 L's in the middle of that name. And I would be pleased to have you there. I would welcome anybody who wants to join the conversation to do so.
Awesome, awesome. And of course, I am Daath Nihilus. You can find me on Instagram at Daath Nihilus, Twitter by the same name, Facebook by my non-magical name, Wade Jackson. And you can also find me on Vero at Daath Nihilus, and also on YouTube at Daath Nihilus, where I post these episodes for all to share and get educated on all things occult. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Kyndyll, for being on here. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope I did these questions justice and did justice to your content, and to make sure that you. I'm sorry that I got a little ahead of the curve there a little bit, but thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure and a joy. I'm happy to do it anytime. If you need people, I'm always game.
Awesome. You have a wonderful night.
You take care. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.